She's not what you'd expect. She's tough and feisty, but gentle and tender. She makes millions and gives millions to the poor. She cries, she laughs, she teaches, she comforts. This is the Dani Johnson Show.
Welcome to the Dani Johnson Show. This is a fun day for us because it is that one day a week where we get to focus just clearly on spiritual matters. And I got to tell you this really quick story. Before I tell you that story, I hope that today's show finds you in a place where you have a refreshing, as well as some things that maybe have confused you for a really long time, that the fog gets cleared up and that some things begin to line up and simply make sense. Hi, I'm Dani Johnson. We do this show to bring to you truth. And once a week, we have this show 6 days a week, but once a week, we put the focus on the best success book that has ever been written. The book that has taught myself as well as countless others how to build businesses, how to grow internally, spiritually, how to grow your finances, solve marriage problems, solve kid problems, solve the world problems. This best success book ever written is called the Bible. So many people are afraid to read this thing, but the fact is, it's where I've learned how to build companies that have gone on to make millions and tens of millions of dollars. It is where I've learned how to endure hard times during a marriage, as well as to flourish and have harmonious and wonderful times in a marriage. It really has taught me everything that I ever needed to know and that I will need to know concerning success in life and living it to the fullest. So today I'm really excited because I'm going to bring to you 4 different guests, people who you have heard of and some that you have not heard of, but you have heard of a story. This story kind of adds to or helps to develop a background of the story, or really a continuation. You see, what happened when the Bible was done being written? What goes on past that time? There's something called a church history, right? Well, I got to tell you about this time. I was in my house. I was sitting at our kitchen table, and we get a lot, and I don't take this lightly because I was a homeless woman. I was a mess of a person. I had done drugs. I had slept around a lot. I had really messed up financially. I grew up abused and just bad, okay? Just all of it was bad. So when I first came to Christ, I encountered a lot of different things. First of all, he really became my everything. He really became my strength, my peace, my strong tower. And then I met Christians. And for some reason, the Christians and Christ didn't quite go well together. There were just so many things that were so messed up. And I began to judge those who wore Christian on their shirt, not realizing that they were just nothing but broken people saved by grace. But as we look in the world today, we see some messy churches. We see messy people who call themselves people of faith. But it doesn't quite add up to what we saw in the Bible, especially the New Testament. And so today we're going to uncover what happened. Where was there a wrong turn? Was there a detour somewhere along the way? Yes, there was. So there I am, and I'm in my kitchen, and we got an offer to read a movie script. It was a docudrama, and it was by actually a client of ours, which I was so very proud of. This particular client had been to multiple First Steps to Success, which is our training event. It's a training seminar, teach you how to do business, grow your career, finances, relationship, everything. And when I started to read this, I began to weep. I was floored at this message that actually had come to her father 20 years before. The same message had come to me at the same time 20 years ago, and I felt so alone for so many years because nobody was telling the truth. It seemed like we much rather have our ears tickled than to actually go back to our roots, because it's in the roots that are so deep that there's a great blessing. But we like the froofy stuff that's really pretty to look at instead of the truth sometimes. So as I read this manuscript, I began to weep. And I've never wanted to be in a movie, have any affiliation with a movie, TV, radio, none of that stuff. That wasn't on my agenda of things to do, but it was certainly God's agenda for me to do. And so after reading it, I couldn't help but to say yes to an itsy-bitsy, itty-bitty, little teeny tiny part. It's about 3 seconds, maybe 2 seconds long. But what's happened from that is the experience that I've had in there, the people that we've had the chance to meet, and this brand new release as of September 19th of Let the Lion Roar. Now, you listen today with an open heart and open mind. Later in the show, joining us is going to be Derek Frank, Jonathan Burgess, and Kevin Sorbo. Kevin Sorbo, you've seen him on the show a couple of times. He's a friend of mine, an amazing man, and he also was in this film. So first, we're going to bring on Vanessa Frank. Vanessa is the client who put this entire thing together. Come on, talk about having a dream of making a movie, and then she goes and she does it. Whatever, girlfriend. I think that's absolutely outrageous. So Vanessa and I are going to talk a little bit about her background, how we came in contact with each other, and about this film that you need to get. You need to own it. Okay. It was released September 19th. This has got to be in your library, and you need to have people over and watch it because it's an important truth of what happened along our church history that has taken us away from a place of great blessing and actually into a place of now we're being judged. That's the reality. We're in a time where there's been lots of correction that has happened from heaven and absolutely due. So we have Vanessa Frank joining us right now. Vanessa, welcome to the Dani Johnson Show.
It's a privilege and a pleasure to be on the show, Dani.
Well, I adore you, girl, and I was floored and blown away watching you in your element, directing the camera people, directing me, right? How you put all of this stuff together. How in the world did this film get birthed?
You know, Dani, I really so utterly believe in the truth that you teach during your training where you talk about, just starting with what God puts in your hands, those little roots, those little things that we can take action on today. Yeah. When we started with this project, it was 3 people around a kitchen table, my parents and I, who just had a real sense of conviction that we had a message that we knew needed to be heard, not just by a few hundred people. At the time my dad was a pastor, and so he was able to preach to a few hundred people. We thought it was a message that needed to be amplified to millions of people. And we didn't know how we were going to get there. We didn't have any perception of everything that God was going to do through this. I think at the time, if you had told us what God would do through this, we just wouldn't have believed you. But we knew that we had to take some small action, and so we knew that the medium of this age, of this era, if we were wanting to reach people, is film, is television. Yep. And so we started to make very, very small, modest plans for how we could do that. And what we saw was that God just breathed upon that, and the few small steps that we took very tentatively at the start enable God to take us on a journey that we could have never envisaged in a million years.
Vanessa, it's so wild to me how many people are afraid to step out in faith. They've got a message inside of them, or they have a vision about something. They've got a goal that they want to achieve, but they just stay afraid. And what's so sad about that is that's largely the church today, the Christians that are out there today. God has planted purpose inside of every single one of us, and yet we sit on the couch with our iPhone in hand, looking at Facebook, seeing what other people are doing with their life, instead of busting out boldly and going, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how all the pieces are going to come together, but I have to do this. I remember many times throughout my whole 27 years of being a businesswoman that has happened. There's certain segments of my life where it's like I pulled myself back, I shrunk back and just said, oh, no, it's not going to work. No one else is for it. No one believes me. I don't have the right connections. It's just too hard. How in the world is that whole thing going to come together? And Vanessa, I'm so proud of you. I am so, so proud of you because look, at a kitchen table, you guys were talking. There was something that was birthed right there. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, you had no idea that it would turn into this. So what is this, Vanessa?
Well, this movie is really a very strong message about the roots of our faith as Christians. I grew up a pastor's daughter. I've been in the church my whole life. And yet, until I came in contact with this teachings that my father beautifully taught me and taught many other people, I had absolutely no perception of what I had been birthed out of. I had no understanding why, for so many people, when I would share with them that I was a Christian, that they would be just so hurt and so offended, even by the mention of that word, because for me, the word Christian had, on the whole, fairly positive connotations. Of course, I'd had instances of being hurt by the church, but on the whole, I had very positive connotations. And yet, what I had not realized until I got in touch with this teaching is actually, unfortunately, how negative of a history the church has had at times. And through learning about this history, for me, my breaking point was in reading some of the historical facts that we uncover in this movie and just being in tears and saying to my mom, this cannot be real. I was reading these reports on Wikipedia, I read my dad's text, and I went to Wikipedia because I had such a hard time believing that Christian leaders could have taken some of the actions that we expose in this movie. And I remember just reading over these comments and just saying to my mom, how can this be? How has no one ever told me about this? How is it that that this has even been allowed to take place, and that we are all so ignorant? And so what this movie does is it takes us through about 2,000 years of church history. It's a little bit similar to the Bible miniseries format. And it shows us where we have come from, and it shows us why we're at where we're at today, which is that, I think most people, even who are ardent supporters of the church, of the Western church, most of us still feel that the church is very ineffective. We are seeing that our cities are not being reached for Christ. We're seeing that people are disaffected. We're seeing more and more just a breach between church values and what is going on in the media and what politicians are speaking into. And I feel that there is just this huge discontent. There is this rising up of people who are so unhappy with the situation. And I feel many of us just feel powerless. We feel confused, we feel powerless, we feel bewildered. That's definitely where I was at. And so for me, when I started digging into this content, it started explaining to me why this was, and it started illuminating for me what the solution to this was. The fact that actually at its root cause, where this comes from is actually a very, very, very simple matter. This is not complex, it's very simple. And when we understand what at the foundation was the problem, we can figure out how to fix this. And I think the exciting thing that I've discovered through working on this movie project is that there are answers. Those answers are in the Bible. Those answers have been ordained since the foundation of the earth. God has got it in his plans to fix this and to bring this whole situation to a glorious place where we are.
And the reality is, this whole project is not just a movie, but it's a movement. We got to come out of darkness and into his shining light. This is Dani Johnson. We'll continue with more right after this.
Stay right here for more of The Dani Johnson Show.
For families in Santa Pancha, Nicaragua, life is filled with fear and struggle. They don't have enough food for their kids, clean water is hard to find, and they're living in a decrepit, unsafe hovel on top of mining tunnels that could explode and sink at any moment. But a miracle is in the making, and you can be a part of transforming this village. Go to kingsransom.org and click on Santa Pancha to see how you can help. That's kingsransom.org, kingsransom.org, and click on Santa Pancha.
We're back. Here's Dani Johnson.
Sometimes we have been fed a lie from people who say they are in the truth. Have you ever heard this story, right? You've heard this before. Your mother, she cuts off the end of the roast before she puts it in the oven. The daughter asks, Mom, why do we do that? How come we cut off the end of the roast before we put it in the oven? And the mom says, I don't know. It's what my mother taught me. I think it makes the roast a little bit more juicy or something like that. So then the daughter, she goes to her grandmom and she says, Grandma, why do we cut this off? And she says, because it wouldn't fit into my pan. She had to think about all the roasts that were made under what? Is it deception? Or is it that somebody just made a decision to do things a little bit differently, and yet that then was passed down from generation after generation after generation? Is it possible that that has happened in our church? Is it possible that today the so-called gospel that is being preached might be a little different than the gospel of Jesus Christ? Is it possible that we have actually started our own foundations, and the foundations are actually not rooted in the Bible at all, but it's actually rooted in a culture called Christianity. I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. You see, the guy who has a gift for music and he played in bars and all of a sudden he gives his life to Christ and now he has to play in a church and he's broke. Really, is that the case? Or should he be at the bar ministering Christ to those who are sinners? You know, there's two schools of thought there, and it depends on how religious you are. What about a school teacher? School teachers I've encountered say, oh gosh, I just wish I could serve the Lord. Well, according to Colossians 3:23, in everything you do, including teaching school, you are serving the Lord. No, but I got to work for a Christian school in order for me to just serve the Lord. Really? Well, a Christian school is the place where the kids have already been spoon-fed, as they've been spoon-fed their canned spinach and they hate it. But the kids that are outside of that Christian school, the ones that are in a public school, they're the ones that have never heard the gospel message. But that is part of our Christian culture. There's some things that just don't line up with the Bible. And if you've read the Bible cover to cover, you know it doesn't line up. You know something's wrong. You know something's ineffective. You know that we're almost a laughing stock today. Joining me today is Vanessa Frank. She's actually a precious client of ours. She has just produced her first film. This film is called Let the Lion Roar. It is a beautiful depiction. It's a documentary that is also a drama. It has a dramatic that has people like Stephen Baldwin, my friend, as well as Kevin Sorbo. Wonderful men that love God with their whole hearts, wonderful family men who have decided to join this project because they know it is a movement and that we've got to let the scales come off of our eyes, get out of Christian culture and get back to what our roots are. So Vanessa, again, I'm so proud of you. Thank you for so eloquently explaining how the story, like how in the world did this movie come? It's a faith story, meaning your story of developing this thing, you know, reaching out and this passion burning inside of you saying we can't just leave this to only a few hundred people. We have been deceived as a huge body of believers, and now is the time the scales falls off of our eyes and we come back to what our roots are. What are you most excited about with this film?
I think for me, what excites me the most is seeing how small of a part of this has been made by the hands of men. Like, yes, we had to go and film the movie and edit it and color it and do all of those things that diligently, as Dani Johnson clients, we've learned to do to the utmost of excellence. But we have seen with this and continue to see every single day how these comparatively small actions that we are doing, God is using in a mighty, mighty, mighty way. For example, when we cast the movie, you know, our wildest hope was that we would maybe have one celebrity in the movie. And we end up with 24 celebrities, of which one is Oscar-nominated, 2 are Grammy-nominated artists. It just goes beyond anything that I think you know, your average filmmaker would look at this and say, oh, well, that's just an everyday occurrence.
No.
And we continue to see this every single day. Right now on Facebook, we're seeing almost 1,000 new fans join this movement every single day. We are seeing huge television shows and radio shows pick up on this story because they are seeing this is not just about a movie, it's about a movement. Now, what you and I know is that it's about even more than that. It's about the completion of God doing a work that he started hundreds of years ago and that he's been saying and promising for years and years and years he would complete. So really, for me, the exciting thing is just being able to see every single day God's faithfulness, that if we were to step out with the, you know, basic talents and skills that we have and in boldness we give what we have, he will do what no man could do for us.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Something I was teaching recently at our last First Steps to Success seminar where we teach business and finance and relationship. And Vanessa, you've been to plenty of those with us. I was talking about how that God has the biggest database. Hello, 7 billion people. What are you worried about? Like, we should not worry about how is this all going to come together? Hello, go to the source. He's got access to the 20 celebrities that you want in your movie or the investors you want for your business. This is Dani Johnson. We'll continue with more right after this.
Don't go away. The next segment might just change your life. This is The Dani Johnson Show.
Now, more of The Dani Johnson Show.
Hi, I'm Dani Johnson, and today we've got a spiritual focus, and really actually looking into history. I'm talking about after Christ came. What happened after that? And how did we get here? How is it that we have the book of Acts that looks nothing like the way Christians are living today. Well, joining me today is, yes, one of the greatest stars in the movie Let the Lion Roar, Derek Frank. You just heard from his daughter, Vanessa Frank. They had a dream. They had a vision. That vision now has come to pass. And it all started with a message that God planted inside of them to expose the great deception in the early years of the church, which shows us how we got to where we're at today. The church today should be a roaring lion, but instead, she's more like a house pet, a house cat, caged, actually, bloated, unfortunately. Certainly not moving in signs and wonders, certainly not totally marked by the Holy Spirit, but a lot of people who say they are of the faith yet have no fruit of it. They say they know God, yet there is no God in their lives. Joining me right now, Derek Frank, pastor, as well as now a movie maker. Derek, tell us about Let the Lion Roar.
Well, hello, Dani. It's a great privilege to be with you, and certainly I reckon what you've just said is just such a truth. We're living in very dark times. People have terrible fears about what's going on in the world today, and hope is in very short supply, and the church ought to be like a light in a dark place. There ought to be a sense of the darkness not being able to overcome the light from the church, but it just is not the case, and the big question is why. And so the film really goes to the very root of that. Let the Lion Roar goes to the root of the problem, takes the lid off why the church in its very early centuries got severed from that sense of identity and ended up in the greatest case of identity theft that's ever taken place in the whole of history. It takes the lid off this, and it exposes how the church got severed from its Jewish roots, got disconnected from the life and the strength it should have, lost its sense of identity and destiny. And that's what tracks through to the state of the church today.
Yeah. You know what, Derek, I don't know if you have met Pastor Jim Cymbala from Brooklyn Tabernacle. He does such a gorgeous job of marrying the time during Paul's days to today and really putting life to our Jewish roots. I don't know if you've ever met him, but I think you should contact him. I think that he would be one that would go crazy over this movie that you guys have made, because it really is the truth. We have Jewish roots, but that has been severed. It's been cut off. And it's almost like this. And Derek, when I read your manuscript, I was weeping. I was absolutely weeping, and I knew I had to be a part of this because we were grafted in. Those who believe in Yeshua, which, by the way, who changed that name? My name is Dani, where I go in Russia. My name is Dani in Mexico. My name is Dani everywhere that I go. But why is it that the translators of the Bible did away with Jesus's Jewish name and created this other name named Jesus, and that's the name that's known everywhere? So when I read this manuscript, and that, hello, we have been grafted in, right? If we believe in Yeshua, Jesus, the Messiah, then we're grafted into Abraham, not Abraham grafted into the modern day Christian world. And it's as though that's how we think as Christians, that no, we weren't grafted into Abraham. We're trying to pull the seed of Abraham over to our modern Christian world. I want you to speak into that.
I mean, that's so true, Dani. And I mean, as we've progressed the ministry of this film and shared it with people, we have been shocked beyond measure about how few people actually understand this. There's a very grand theological word called replacement theology, which people don't really know the term, but what it means is that the church is reckoned to have replaced Israel in God's purposes. And you could say it's a theology much in need of replacement, because people do not realize what's happened. You know the phrase, you can have the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So often what people have is truth. They really have been born again. They have met Yeshua. They've become a new creation. What they have, you might say, is nothing but the truth, but they do not have the whole truth of the greater context of God's saving purposes. And that is why the church is so weak. It's like a tree planted in the wrong soil. It just doesn't have the nourishing sap coming up through the roots. Or another analogy that's been used sometimes is like building a brick wall, but if you've got the foundation is weak and not properly cemented together, it doesn't matter how good the top of the wall is.
Yep.
If there's a weakness at the bottom, the whole wall is weak.
That's right.
Another illustration people use is if you're buttoning up your shirt and you start buttoning in the wrong place, however, when you do all the other buttons, you've got a very funny-looking shirt. And it all goes back to what you can describe as the greatest of all deceptions, that the church somehow had replaced Israel. It's like the mother of deceptions. There's so much deception in the church today, but you can track it all back to its origins in this one deception. And so the result is people know Yeshua as the Lamb of God, and they may know him in a very real way as the Lamb of God, but they rarely know him as the Lion of the tribe of Judah.
Yes.
So they end up following a lie rather than following the lion.
Yep. So Derek, where was it? Okay, where did the great deception enter in?
Well, what happened really was when Yeshua was being received by the early believers, who, keep in mind, they were all Jewish.
All Jewish.
And they were all Jewish.
Who kept Passover, who celebrated Hanukkah, who celebrated Shavuot, who celebrated Sukkot, who celebrated Rosh Hashanah, which I think is one of the greatest holidays, right? 10 days. We're supposed to go and ask for forgiveness from for every wrong thing that we did to somebody else. We're going to be knocking on our neighbor's door, begging for forgiveness for our spouse, begging for forgiveness from our boss. For 10 straight days, we ask for forgiveness. And on Yom Kippur, that's 25 hours of fasting and asking God to forgive us. I think the church could utilize that holiday really smartly. I don't know. It's just a thought.
This is exactly it. The devil was so threatened when he saw that Jewish believers now not only had God on the outside, they'd also got God on the inside, that Yeshua had come, that there was nothing he could do to stop that. All he could do was start sowing a lie. Now, at first, no one really listened to him because they were all Jewish. But once some Gentiles started joining, and the devil's lie was, did God really say God still has a place in God's purposes? After time, they started to listen, and they believed this lie. They took on, as it were, a relationship with God. They just saw going direct between them and God. And rather like if you cut a ship loose of its moorings, it can then just float off anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to the church. So it had no moorings. It just floats off anywhere. So the church loses the gospel. It loses the power of the Spirit. It goes off into religiosity, roll on the dark ages. The Messianic believers get caught between a rock and a hard place. The Gentile church doesn't want to know them. Judaism doesn't want to know them. And they get lost. Israel then doesn't have the witness it should have. As Israel doesn't have the witness, it was meant to be a light to the nations. The world doesn't have its witness. When the world doesn't have a witness, the principalities and powers don't have a witness. It all goes back to that one first lie. And the devil has gone on perpetuating it to this day. So I guarantee if you go into church on Sunday and you say to someone, what's replacement theology? Most people will look at you absolutely blankly. So if you said to them, well, do you think God's replaced Israel and God's purposes? Many would struggle to answer that question. There is a huge need for education. And so God simply said to me, very simply, though I was a pastor at the time, you can go on preaching thousands of messages to the same few hundred people, or you can take one message to hundreds of thousands of people through the media of film. And by docudrama, by making it very visually acceptable, you can take people into something they wouldn't dream of reading a book about. They would perhaps struggle with the idea of doing that, but get them to watch some of the anti-Semitism of the early church. Get them to see how it played out through history. And all of a sudden people say, why ever didn't you tell me this before? Now, many have to go away and then think about, gosh, whatever does this mean? Because it changes my view of the gospel so dramatically.
It really, really does.
We've seen people say, hey, we're so grateful. So that's why we've got the film, we've got a book called Escaping the Great Deception. It's all in a package, and the goal is to release not just a movie, but a movement, and to get everyday regular believers to take this and go and share it with other people and say, hey, can we talk about this? Can we watch the film together? Can we even study the book together? Let's talk about the attitude that the church has to Israel, or the attitude God would call us to have to Israel today, and to see what part he would have us play in this great end-time work that's going on.
Yep.
And so God has equipped us with a resource, and we've been amazingly backed by Hollywood actors, by some great filmmakers with masses of special effects, people like yourself, so many people who've got behind us and say, hey, this is a unique resource to use film like this. And we have just been so excited by the uptake. If people buy a box full of them, it's still only a small investment. They go and share it with others, and this can change the spiritual understanding of other believers dramatically.
And be on a firm foundation, and that's where we need to be. It's LetTheLionRoar.com. LetTheLionRoar.com. Go get your movie right now. Sit around with other believers. The non-believers are probably not going to understand all of it, but the believers, so they can see, how do we become a ship without our mooring? Just off in a distance, going our own way. We got to come back to our roots. This is Dani Johnson. We'll continue with more after this.
Be sure to tell a friend about the Dani Johnson Show. It just might be the key to the breakthrough they need. Stay right here for more of the Dani Johnson Show.
Get ready to live the uncommon life. Here's Dani Johnson.
I don't like it when I know I've been deceived, I've been lied to for a really long time, and then I come into the truth and, oh, gosh, has it ever happened to you? Or you're just like, oh, you know, there's a movie. You need to get a hold of it. LetTheLionRoar.com is where you can find the movie. People like Kevin Sorbo, Stephen Baldwin, myself, tiny itty bitty little squeaky part. When I read this thing, I'm telling you, I just knew I had to align my life with Derek and his daughter, Vanessa Frank, who were the ones that birthed this docudrama that really explains so much about where we have come from, where there was a place in the church that kind of gave us a detour, and we're still on that detour. And because we're on that detour, we don't have our identity firmly rooted in anything besides a modern day culture that is dark. It's dark. Whatever happened to the book of Acts? Where are those Acts of those early believers today, risking their lives to spread the faith? And who to? Jesus said he came first for the Jew, then to the Gentile. And you know what's interesting about that is that if he came first for the Jew and then the Gentile, I want you next Sunday at church to look at the mission board. Who from your church is going to Israel to lead the people, God's chosen people? Who is going to Israel to spread the gospel of their Messiah? Listen, God chose Israel. He chose Abraham. He chose that bloodline to put his promises on. He chose then that same bloodline to bring the Bible, and then to bring the Bible to life in the flesh, and that was Jesus. You know that most of the world, their judicial system is based on the law that God gave Moses? God adopted first this people, this small tribe, and then he did exactly what he said he would do with them, and he promised the Messiah would come through that bloodline. And they did. But all of a sudden, a lie was dispersed amongst those people. And the lie was that, hey, we're believers in Yeshua, Jesus the Messiah. We don't need the Jews anymore. We don't have to have anything to do with them. No, the Bible is very clear. He came first for the Jew, then the Gentile. But here we go, gallivanting all over the world and ignoring Israel, ignoring the very people that Jesus came for. He came for them. Derek Frank joins me now. He and his daughter and his wife have developed a film that has Hollywood actors in it. It's a docudrama that explains why the church is in such dark times right now. And really, it came out of dark times, did it not, Derek? It was during before a great awakening that was kind of the birthplace for the Great Deception.
I mean, it was born out of very, very dark times, and I think this is the message of hope for us today, that in the darkness of these times, that God is wanting to speak. So the phrase, let the lion roar, actually comes from Amos 3:8, which speaks of the prophet crying out so powerfully and saying, the lion has roared, who shall not fear? And the lion is roaring today. He's roaring, though, in the way only God roars, which is a way that if you have the ears to hear, it's deafening. If you don't have the ears to hear, you can't hear it at all.
Yeah.
And so the question is simply to say, God, open my ears that I may hear your roar, that I may roar myself as you are in me, this message of warning, because Amos was a message to a people who thought they were in a great place, and actually they were very far from God, and it was a warning of what would happen otherwise if they did not heed. Now, in the day and age we are, the most the church faces right now is distraction, and we don't do a very good job with coping with distraction. It is not impossible in the not-too-distant future the church may be facing destruction, and how will the church stand? Now, if it stands on a firm foundation, destruction will come at it, but it will not happen. But for those who are on a weak foundation, for those who have no connection to the roots, it's like when a storm comes, if your roots are weak, you go over. If your roots are strong, you stay standing.
And what really reveals those roots, Derek, and of anything that I've ever heard or seen, was this film. When I read that manuscript, I went, finally, somebody's saying it. It's something that God revealed to me over 20 years ago, and apparently it was around the same exact time that God had revealed it to you. And I felt so alone with that message, like, hello, we have not replaced the Jews. What are we doing? How are we turning our backs on them? How come we're not ministering to them? How come we're not praying for them? God is very specific that we're supposed to do these things. Derek, it really blesses me that you said yes to this call to make this film, LetTheLionRoar.com. You want your foundation revealed to you as a believer in the Messiah. You have to know this information because we have been deceived for a really long time, and it's time we come out of that and we get back to our roots and our strong foundation. We can stand strong no matter what darkness comes our way. Derek, thanks so much for joining me. Again, the movie is Let the Lion Roar. Go to LetTheLionRoar.com. This is not just a movie. It is a movement. Get involved with the movement right now. Next, our guest is another person that was on the show, Jonathan Burgess. He actually is the host, the television show host of Jewish Voice Today. Jonathan is coming from a totally different perspective. You see, Derek and his daughter and his wife are not Jewish. Yet they're screaming out as people who are Christians saying we have forsaken our roots. But now here's from a different perspective. We have a Messianic Jew, one that carries the very bloodline, the same blood that was in Jesus' veins when he was on this earth is the same blood that is in Jonathan's. And I'm telling you, every single time for the last 2 decades that I would encounter a Jew, something would stir inside of me. I would sit there and go, oh my gosh, I know we're blessed because a Jew is right here. And I'd even say that to some of them. I would say, I know that I am blessed this moment because you're standing right here next to me. And they would look at me perplexed, like, what are you talking about? Because you're the seed of Abraham. You are the Bible alive. You're it right here. You're the people that this book was talking about. Not only that, but my Savior came. And the blood that he shed from the cross is in your veins. You have the same DNA as Jesus Christ of Nazareth, or his Jewish name, Yeshua. Christ, by the way, is not his last name. Messiah, he's the anointed one. Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah. I would get so blown away. And so when we return after this short break, Jonathan Burgess is going to join us, and he's going to give us a perspective of why did he join this film project, and from a Jew's perspective, the Christian church. And what has happened through history that has now caused that right there in Israel, only 10% of those in Israel know the Messiah. Only 10%. And Jesus said he came first for the Jew, then the Gentile. But the current Gentiles have turned their back on ministering to the Jew. They need to hear the gospel desperately. They are God's chosen people. We must wake up out of our ridiculous slumber, our drunkenness of Christian culture, and go back to our roots. The movie is Let the Lion Roar. Go to LetTheLionRoar.com. Stay right here. Jonathan Burgess joins us next.
Good people bring out the good in people. And you're sharing great moments with thousands of good people right now. There's more of the Dani Johnson Show coming up. Stay here.
The whole story of how I went from homeless to millions is right here in this book, First Steps to Wealth. I'd love to give you a free copy of this book. Just dial 888-757-8880. You can get your free copy of this book. It's like a real book, my friend. You can get an ebook copy for free right now, or if you'd like to pay the shipping to get this $15 book to your house, I'd be happy to send it to you. 888-757-8880. Get your copy of First Steps to Wealth today and begin on a brand new path of some great success.
This is the Dani Johnson Show. And now, here's Dani.
It's time that a people that were supposed to be bold, a people that were supposed to be, vigilant, even bringing a message with such passion, but more importantly, results. Unfortunately, that people don't have a lot of results. They've lost their passion. Boldness is used for buying cars instead of spreading the good news that Yeshua, the Messiah, came nearly 2,000 years ago. LetTheLionRoar.com is where you'll find the movie, Let the Lion Roar. This isn't a movie, it's a movement. It's a people who have come together for a great deception, the veil of deception to be pierced, that the enemy who hates our soul, who has been prevailing against us largely for hundreds and hundreds of years, all started with a drifting from our foundation. The drifting that caused us to end up somewhere in the middle of nowhere, trying to find the power once again, trying to find the foundation again, but not knowing where to find it. LetTheLionRoar.com. Get the copy of this immediately. Have your family sit around that screen, watching it, learning it, taking notes, so that you can come into the fullness of the truth, the whole truth about where did the Christian faith start from? Well, Dani, I already know that. That's from Jesus. Oh, no. Yes, that's true. But Jesus was a Jew, and there's promises for the Jewish people. And one is this: I will bless those that bless you. I will curse those that curse you, and I'll bring trouble on those that trouble you. When was the last time you blessed a Jew? When was the last time you helped them? Are you feeding their orphans? Are you bringing them food? They're struggling right now, as has happened throughout their entire history. But God always prevails, and he always raises up with his righteous right hand to protect them and to bring on those who have cursed them what is due to them. There's no other people like them. There's no other people like them. God chose them to bring the Messiah. God chose them to bring our Bible, the thing we're supposed to eat on every single day. He chose that bloodline to do that. He adopted them as his chosen people first, and that anybody that believed in the Messiah that came through that bloodline, that then, and only then, would we now be grafted into those same promises. Joining me right now is Kevin Sorbo. Kevin has been on the show before. He's a friend of us here at DaniJohnson.com. I was blown away. We both were, actually. I was in a grocery store. I just finished filming my tiny little pipsqueak part on the film, Let the Lion Roar. He had the majority of the parts in there, and he's like, dude, I just found out I saw your name on here. I didn't know you were here. And so we just happened to pass while the filming was going on. But Kevin, I have to tell you, first of all, I so enjoyed our interview that we did with God's Not Dead. I just actually purchased that movie. I'm going to make sure that my descendants see that movie. It was such a powerful message. But Kevin, I'm really blown away with your testimony for Christ. And when I saw that you were involved with this, I just knew and I saw that truly the character of Christ is dwelling in you, and that you know and you believe that we as a church are nowhere where we need to be. Why did you say yes to being involved with the movie Let the Lion Roar?
Well, you know me, I just like to work.
Shush. It's bigger than that. Give me a break.
No, you know, it's interesting. I grew up, I'm a second generation Norwegian, Minnesota. Of course, you grew up in a Lutheran church. But I don't remember really any negativity towards Israel and towards Jews as a kid growing up. I am non-denominational now. I'm a Christian, and I believe in God, believe in Jesus, and I've just sort of been doing that ever since my college days. I don't really attach myself to Catholic, Protestant, whatever it may be.
Me too.
But being in that Lutheran world and getting a little more information on Luther and John Calvin, who I portrayed in the movie, I was actually shocked because I had no idea that these guys were such huge anti-Semites. And I was blown away with all the negativity towards. I mean, obviously these guys did some wonderful work within the churches, but they held the Jewish people as a whole responsible for the death of Christ. In reality, you know, I mean, there was Jesus, there was a very hardened criminal, and the Pharisees are standing there, and they said, okay, who should we set free and who should we turn to the Romans? And there were people that turned against Jesus. But let's face it, many, many Jewish people at that time mourned his death. Of course they did. And it was part of God's plan. The whole thing was part of God's plan. You can't sit there and blame anybody for the death of Jesus. Jesus was supposed to die. He was supposed to die for us and die for our sins. And it wasn't going to be a pleasant death for him. No. And he did it all for the sinful people that we are. Yes. And it was just an amazing part for me to be in. And this whole documentary deals with sort of uncovering, you know, one of the greatest deceptions of our time. Yeah. And it's really letting people know that there were things changed in the Bible. There were things that God wanted in there that Calvin and Luther changed. They took Israel, they took Jews out, and they replaced it just basically with the word church. And this is going to be an interesting movie. It's going to create a lot of discussion. Yeah, it already has in lots of places. I don't know if you've talked to Vanessa, but the Facebook page for Let the Lion Roar is growing by 1,000 a day. Wow. That's crazy. The kind of places that the movie has, the doors that God has opened up for them, the big television shows that they've been able to be interviewed on. I mean, there's a crazy gravitation towards this messaging. And I don't know if you know this, but Vanessa and her father have been clients of ours for years. And they were at a First Steps to Success that it ignited them. Like, we have to stop dreaming about this and we got to step out and do this. So I'm like particularly proud mama. Like, I'm so proud of you guys that you did this and that God brought people like you and Stephen Baldwin, who's like a brother from another mother for me. You know, all of these crazy people that we all came together from separate places and said, this needs to be done. This is a project that needs to be done. Now, this is what's profound. You came from the church that really authored some of this deception. Oh, yeah. And again, and what was it? And this is, you know, and I know somebody's so mad that I just said that, but here's the facts. Have you ever been hurt before? Yes. Have you ever had your feelings hurt? Duh. Yes. Do pastors get their feelings hurt? Probably more than the people sitting in the seats. Do pastors feel betrayed? Yeah. Do they have the normal emotions that every other human does? Duh. And that we see, Kevin, Martin Luther, and Calvin to have been not human. That they could have never made a mistake, that they could have never misinterpreted something while they were writing all of their commentary. But today, do you know, Kevin, that in seminaries, that the Bible isn't even being read cover to cover, but commentary after commentary after commentary is what's being spoon-fed to these students who want to preach the gospel, yet they're reading the heart, soul, and emotion of man and his dividing of the word. And calling it God's word. That's scary. It is kind of scary. I mean, people are going to be shocked to learn that, you know, past leaders of the church, they were actually saying a Jewish synagogue was worse than a brothel. And that Jews were once the son of God, but became the sons of Satan. I mean, it's unbelievable. Some of the words that were coming out of people that were supposed to be leaders of the church and leaders of, proponents of God. And it's amazing. But, you know, this whole idea of this documentary is really to set the record straight and put things on the right line. Yep. That, we're supposed to be Gentile and Jew, like you said. You know, You're looking at Gentile right here. We're all supposed to be an arm in arm. Yep, absolutely. We can certainly be different in different ways, but, you know, there's one God. Yeah. There's one God. Yeah. I love what you said, that Jesus was supposed to die that death. He was. And the fact is that even Passover, and this is something that I can tell you that when the Lord had revealed to me through a DNA test that I was half Jewish, and I'd always been attracted to the Jew and have always had Jewish stuff in my house, it was really profound that the Lord had told me to walk through the Jewish calendar. Now this is my second year walking through it. The richness of my faith that has grown in the appreciation of my Savior, which his name is Yeshua, which actually means Savior. That richness of that faith, the foundation that has been laid before me, inside of me, is so much stronger celebrating Passover versus the pagan holiday of Easter.
So much more solid celebrating Rosh Hashanah, which forces me to go and ask for forgiveness from every person that I've offended over the last year. I think the church should do that. Yom Kippur, 1 day set apart, no work, ask God to forgive you. Be in prayer, fasting. So much appreciation through the Jewish traditions, right? The laws, actually, God told them to have these 7 feasts. He told them to celebrate and not forget for all generations. They were supposed to teach these things to our kids. For some reason, with this replacement theology, that when Luther and Calvin got their feelings hurt because they could not convert the Jew, so then they said, no more. They are sons of hell. They are not God's chosen people anymore. And now that's what we read and that's what we believe. It's obvious that we've been deceived.
Yep. Well, nothing says thank you, Jesus, more than an Easter bunny with colored eggs.
Don't forget the hollow chocolate ones.
That's right. And don't forget Halloween.
Gosh, it's disgusting. And you know what the Halloween is a replacement of? Sukkot. Sukkot. It's a holiday that is reminding us of the 40 years in the desert and how God delivered us out of that tent and into a relationship with Him. This is
tell me something I didn't know.
There you go. This is Dani Johnson. We're going to continue with our last segment with Kevin Sorbo right after this.
Stay right here for more of The Dani Johnson Show.
God's solutions, spiritual solutions. Here's Dani Johnson.
Do you like it when you know you've been lied to and you find out? No, you don't. Hey, have you ever had your feelings like stomped on where there's like something that you believed in so strongly and then somebody comes against you and says, oh, no way, I'm not going to buy that nonsense? That's exactly what happened to Calvin. Yeah, one of the greatest commentators, at least he was called the greatest commentator, as well as Martin Luther. They got their feelings hurt just like you and I do. But the unfortunate thing is that they wrote commentary that the current modern day Christian world is largely built on hurt feelings instead of the truth. The truth. Joining me right now is Kevin Sorbo. He and I both had the chance to work on a documentary. It's a docudrama. He actually played Calvin in this film. And he's here today telling us about it. By the way, the movie is Let the Lion Roar. LetTheLionRoar.com is where you can get your copy of it. It truly has been a movement. It's absolutely shocking, actually, when you hear how God has brought this thing together and why He's brought it together. Kevin, you said, in fact, I love the video that you did with Vanessa on the LetTheLionRoar.com/buy. That was powerful. You had me in tears when I was watching that. I was just so proud of you as a sister in the Lord. I was so proud of you and the passion that you portrayed in there about the importance of this movie. Can you talk a little bit about how it is a movement and not just a movie?
It's just something that needed to be said, and I'm so thankful for what Vanessa and her father put together with this, because it's obviously a huge labor of love for them. Mm-hmm. And he felt compelled. I believe he saw this in a vision or a dream that he had to get this message out there. Because we have been going down the wrong path. I mean, you look at religion through the centuries, and you look at the wars, and you look at the hate and the anger, you look what's going on in the radical Muslim world and the way they interpret the Quran. I mean, it's unbelievable what's going on, and something has to be done to bring us together. And it can't just be words all the time. We've got to rely on a much higher power than this us talking to each other. There has to be, a real hope, real salvation, and real energy put up by so many people that other people know that there's so much more to life than just sitting there being angry and upset and frustrated with your life. Because look what people do as a whole. People sit there and point fingers and blame everybody else for the downfalls. In reality, they got to look in the mirror. That's where the problem is, guys. Just look in the mirror.
Yep. Yep. And we have to make the appropriate changes. You know, when you mentioned about, through religion, so much blood has been shed. That's actually how it was hidden that my family was Jewish. I'm Latin, and Spain is where both my mother and father's, some of their bloodline had come from. And so you look at that Spanish Inquisition that said what? Jews, you convert to Catholic now. You convert to this different form of Christianity now, or you die. You leave, or you die, or you convert. Pick one. Sad. Now, is that really Jesus? No, that's not Jesus. But Paul, being martyred for his faith, and the many others have been martyred for their faith. Well, that's different. He was sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. They killed him because of what he believed in. But here we had those who were the Gentiles who adopted this faith, now are using this faith to kill. It was all about the power of numbers, kind of very similar to today. We care about how many people are in our churches, that we look successful if we've got the room filled with 20,000 people or 25,000 every Sunday. And if we've got a big TV ministry, then, oh yeah, then we're really successful. We ain't successful. We're a mess. LetTheLionRoar.com is where you'll find why we are a mess and how do we clean this up. How did this happen? How did we get off track from the book of Acts to where we are today? There's a gigantic difference. Go to LetTheLionRoar.com now. Get your copy. It's a documentary. Kevin Sorbo was in it. Stephen Baldwin was in it, as well as 20 other celebrities that were in it, and many of them Emmy Award winners, Grammy Award winners. People who've been up for Oscars were also in the movie. You want to get your copy of it right away. Kevin, as we're getting ready to wrap up the show, what do you say to that person that's like, why is this important? Who cares if we've been deceived? I know Jesus today. What does it matter?
This is the problem of the world we live in now. We live in a very short span of attention world. Everything's just quick little clips. And apathy rules right now. Yeah. And people are just, people are just giving up. You look at the moral bar now. You look at what's going on, to get into politics, I hate to jump into that, but I'm going to. You look at Watergate, 40 years ago, and you look at the number of things, the number of huge scandals going on within our government now, and everything is okay. And that's the problem. I'm just using that as a picture of everything is okay right now. Where's the uproar in Nigeria? Around the world that's happening in Nigeria and Egypt, in the Middle East, where Christians are being beheaded by these peaceful so-called Muslims. And where's the uproar over that? Yeah. It's amazing. You sit there and you look at Ferguson, you're going, wait a minute, okay, this young man was killed, and yet people rioted. People were storming the street. Protesting is fine. Please protest. That's our right to protest. But to destroy other people's businesses, to make things worse. Do you realize in those 280 arrests, I think 90% of them were people that aren't even from that area? They weren't there to support that kid. They weren't there to do any support at all there. And this is where we live now. We live in such a world that's at a tipping point right now that just the anger and the frustration, and that's what this is for. This is to hopefully heal all that hate and all that anger and frustration that people feel in their lives. Yeah. And I'm hoping people take the time to look at this. Yeah.
Yeah, because there really has been a great deception. I feel like the deception has lulled us to sleep like a lullaby. Our eyes are closed. And you said it so well, Kevin, so all of this is okay, right? This is all okay. All of this corruption is okay. And why is it okay? Because we have lost our way. We have lost our way. We as believers, that we call ourselves Christians, but we don't know the Bible cover to cover. We haven't read the thing, actually. We depend on a man or a woman on television or on it behind a pulpit to feed us what's inside that gigantic book on a Sunday for 45 minutes. Really? We can no longer be that people. And here's the facts. We cannot deny the fruit. The fruit. We don't know what's up from down. We don't know what's right from wrong. Isaiah prophesied it. He said that there would be a day where we don't know the difference between good and evil, that we actually call good evil and we call evil good. That's a deceived people. He was prophesying about us. LetTheLionRoar.com. Get your copy of this docudrama now. Kevin Sorbo, Stephen Baldwin, as well as a bunch of other people that were in there. You are going to have the scales fall off of your eyes, and you're going to be now grafted into the roots. And with a solid foundation and solid roots, now you will stand bold. Now you will roar with the lion that is roaring, the lion from the tribe of Judah. Get your copy now. LetTheLionRoar.com. Get it. Tell other people about it. Let's go crazy. This is a movement that I believe you're going to be blessed as a direct result. And many people are going to come out of their slumber and realizing, wait a second, no wonder we're a mess. We got to fix this thing. And this is one way we can help fix it. Kevin Sorbo, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you for joining us here on the Dani Johnson Show. Tomorrow, we'll have another topic that'll make you probably go, what? As I'm sure that today being our spiritual focus of the week. And I want to hear from you, by the way. I want to hear that if you've watched that docudrama and you're spreading the news, I want to hear what it's meant to you. So please contact us on Facebook, Dani Johnson Live, as well as Twitter. And again, don't forget, tomorrow you'll be joining us at the same place, same time, same station. God bless you. Have a great one.
You've been listening to The Dani Johnson Show. It's our belief that you can live a better, healthier, happier life. All you need is a little encouragement, a different perspective, a positive force in your life. Get that and more on the next Dani Johnson Show.